Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to start with another topic, which is in continuation of the previous topics. That was when we were discussing about HRM and its scope, its function. Today, I will be talking in this lecture, I will be talking about personal management and how personal management, before human resource management, personal management was much prevalent, and later on in the during the 1990s HRM came into existence, but before that personal management was full-fledgedly taken into was being adopted, was in practice in industries and in organizations. So in this lecture of mine I will be talking about the personal management, evolution of personal management, and how it has been transformed into today's HRM, and then more modern version of it, that is the strategic human resource management. And then we'll further discuss in this lecture that what are the various changes or differences with HRM and HRD. Now, if we talk about the evolution of HRM, that is phase 1 and phase 2, we'll travel to history. The phase 1 was the industrial revolution, and this was the birth of factories. We all know about the industrial revolution in European countries. It has emerged there, and people had started moving because the feudal system came into, it was no longer functioning. The farmers were moving from farms to from their villages to the cities. So but the conditions were terrible. Although people started to migrate from smaller communities to larger cities so that they could have a better lifestyle, better standard of living, but of course the conditions were in the cities were not very much favorable. They were terrible. The labor, there weren't labor laws. Uh, Child labor was rampant, cheap labor was available, dangerous machinery, no social security measures. So there were a lot of issues during that period of time. The 14 hours day, then child labor again, I said. Some factories owners even appointed welfare officers to address basic needs, but that was the earliest form of HR. And so we all know that the factories replaced cottage industries. There were poor working conditions. Welfare measures weren't very prominent that time, though they had appointed welfare officers. So this was the first industrial revolution, which was during the 1760s and 1840s. The second phase came with the scientific management, which was led by Frederick Taylor. And he believed in breaking every job into tiny steps to find the one best possible way. So he used stopwatches to measure every movement. While this boosted productivity, it treated humans like machines. So workers became got bored and alienated, and this led to the next phase, a reaction against Taylor's cold approach. In fact, focus on efficiency, standardization, productivity was the key part in this phase, and the workers were used interchangeably as parts of machine. As I had mentioned earlier, that machines depreciate, but if we human beings, they appreciate if they are done properly, or they are if proper investment has been done and development had been looked into it. So this was the first two phases of the in regarding to how HRM emerged. During the British period also, if we talk about the Indian context, during the British periods, it was evidenced in the report of the Indigo Mission that the working conditions were appalling, living conditions were subhuman, and several abuses prevailed in the indigo plantations. Again, as regard tea plantations, several cases of inhuman cruelties caused to the workers were encountered. And in the Indian context, after the Plantation Act of 1863, though it made certain provisions that if the workers fail to complete their period of contract, they should be imprisoned for a period not exceeding 3 months. there were a lot of issues related with the passage of this act. The laborers they were being tortured, they were being imprisoned, and who attempted to run away were subjugated to whipping and allied extreme punishments. Then so accordingly, the workers were entirely helpless in the face of organized and powerful European planters. So the above conditions prevailed till the enactment of the Factories Act of 1881, and according to this act, the workers employed in the factories were allowed a weekly off day, and provisions were also made for inspection as well as limiting the hours of work for women workers to 11 per day. So the act further provided that the minimum age of children for employment should be 7 years, and that the maximum working hours for them should not exceed 7 hours a day, and that too in the day shift. So in 1890, the first labor organization designated as Bombay Mills Hand Association was established in India. So subsequently in 1905, the Printers Union at Calcutta, and in 1907 the Postal Union at Bombay were established when we talk about the industrial phase in Indian context. So in fact, the Madras Labour Union was also organized thereafter in 1918, and in 1920 the indentured labor system involving migration of Indian labor to the other countries on contract basis was abolished as a result of a strong national movement. So in the same year, the Central Labour Board was established to federate the different unions in the Bombay city, and All India Trade Union Congress was organized. So in 1923, for the first time in the organized sector, Tata Steel appointed K.A. Nairoji as a labor or welfare officer to look after labor issues in the various departments of the steel work. And in fact, the formal implementation of the Indian Trade Union Act 1926 forms a landmark in the history of industrial relations in this country, that is in India. The Royal Commission on Labour, that is 1921, 1929 and 1931, recommended the appointment of labor officers or liaison officers to deal with recruitment as measures to prevent corrupt practices in Indian industry. They considered recruitment officers directly reporting to general managers. So as the commission observed, no employee should be engaged except by the labor officer personally in consultation with the departmental head, and none should be dismissed without his consent except by the manager after hearing what the labor officer had to say accordingly. So the Bombay Mill Owners Association and the Indian Jute Mills Association appointed labor officers in 1935 and 1938 respectively. During the World War II, the need for mobilizing labor support was felt, and thus several welfare officers were appointed to deal with working conditions, canteen facilities, ration shops, recreation, medical facilities, workers' housing, and allied fringe benefit. So this was the pre-independence phase when you talk about how personal management and how with regard to HRM, the evolution of HRM. Then the post-independence phase, if you talk about the post-independence phase in India, with the emergence of compulsory adjudication under the Industrial Dispute Act in 1947, the welfare officers were made responsible for handling the disputes and adjudication pertaining to the conditions of services, including wages, leaves, retirement benefits, and bonus. Thus, they became industrial relations officers and started performing industrial relation functions such as collective bargaining, conciliation, and adjudication. And Employment Exchange Act also came into existence. It also had talked about the compulsory notification of vacancies in 1959, and the Apprentice Act 1961 were passed to regulate the recruitment and training of workers respectively. So in view of growing labor legislation commencing with the right to hire and ending with the right to fire, the employees tended to employ welfare of labor officers with a legal background. 21st first session of Standing Labour Conference, which was held in December 1963, recommended that the functions of welfare officer and personnel officer should be precisely demarcated, and that the former should not be responsible for dealing with disciplinary cases against workers or appears in court on behalf of the management against the workers in any labor dispute cases. This was the first two phases. Now came the first three, the phase three, that was the Hawthorne studies, that was 1924 and 1932, and this was a turning point. Elton Mayo conducted experiments at a factory, changing lighting levels. He found that regardless of whether lights got brighter or dimmer, productivity went up. Why? Of course, because workers knew they were being studied. So this Hawthorne effect proved that attention, recognition, and social relationships, matter more than the physical conditions. So this gave birth to the human relations movement. Suddenly, managers cared about morale, teamwork, and communication. Then the phase four started with post World War II era. In the third phase, psychological and social factors also came into existence, apart from the economic concern that although industries and organizations, establishments, they enhances the GDP of a country, or they bring about employment, they can generate employment and strengthen the economic system. Nevertheless, the social psychological factors were also given importance, and human relations movement came into existence. So the managers have started working on the morale, teamwork, communication, relationship amongst the employees within establishment. The phase 4 post World War II era. After World War II, personal management became a formal profession. Labor unions gained tremendous power. As I mentioned, in the Indian context, what had happened, strikes were common. Government passed laws like minimum wage, 40-hour work week, and safety standards. So HR's role shifted to compliance and labor negotiation. So personal management was more formalized. And as we know that laws came into existence. So then the fifth phase was the strategic HRM, that is was during the 1980s and 2000s. So 1990s, if we particularly talk about 1990s, the era of special economic zones were created, globalization, privatization, and liberalization came into existence, and there was a phase of HRM emerged as a more of a strategic, more of a modern means. So this was revolutionary. HR stopped being just an administrative cost center and became a strategic partner during the 1980s and 2000 with the advent of globalization, privatization, and liberalization. Dave Ulrich's model positioned HR as a business partner, considered as a change agent and employee champion. In fact, companies started measuring HR's role, they started considering whether training actually improves profit, and the CEO wanted the chief HR officer in board meetings. So at this stage, talent management, the realization that people are an important asset, and they are they are the core of human beings, or the employees, they are the core of any organization, they are the biggest strength. So these all HR metrics was being established. Officers, trainers, they started, their performance evaluation, performance appraisal were taken into consideration. So it started focusing more on people and how an organization can grow in terms of bringing about considering people as an asset. Then the sixth phase, of course, is the digital and AI era today, as we talk about 2010 onwards. And today we have the HRIS system, the Human Resource Information System, that automate payrolls, benefits, and record keeping. AI scans thousands of resumes in seconds. Chatbots are also there, which answers employees' questions 24/7. Remote work exploded after COVID, as we all know, the gig economy, Uber, freelance platforms, they change how we define employment. Today we talk about gig economy, we talk about these so many various platforms, so many apps which had reduced the burden and had also brought about different new dimensions to employment and economic generation. So people analytics uses data to predict turnover and identify high potential employees. So thus we can say that it focuses on diversity. If you talk about today's era, HR focuses on diversity, equity and inclusion is now become a top priority. And we have come from a long way from just only talking about labor officers and welfare officers. So today we have a more strategic phase of HRM. Now, if we think, this was the part when HRM was there, but before HRM, as I said, that personal management was more into focus, and in fact, a personal manager, he maintains employees' files, process leave request, calculate overtime pay, and make sure the company doesn't violate any laws. So personal management emerged early in the 1900s and was dominant until the late 1980s. As I was talking about the various phases of HRM, but little bit of it's better to understand about personal management too. We have seen how HRM has emerged, but it becomes imperative to understand the emergence of personal management too. So its primary focus is the personnel, the employees, but from an administrative perspective. So personal management was purely more of an administrative perspective, but HR, as I said earlier, it is more of a strategic. So person means the body of persons engaged in any services, and management applies to the application of skills. Now, if we talk about, in fact, in many government offices and factories, there are still personal departments. You'll find personal departments rather than HR departments. The limitation, it doesn't think strategically about developing people or gaining any kind of competitive advantage through talent. That's why modern organizations have transitioned to HRM, but few government offices and factories, they have this personal departments. And however, the most strategic HRM, they needs accurate records and legal compliance. Now, if we briefly look into the personal management during the 1970s, so in early 70s, as Punikar had observed, the personnel file covered under the three major areas of professional disciplines. It was namely labor welfare, industrial relation and personal administration, and these three areas revealed the chronological order of the development of the personal field. Immediately after industrialization, labor welfare, mainly social reformist in nature, came into the picture. So the inevitable emergence of trade unions, resistance organizations to employers, opened the field of industrial or union management relations. And with the development of scientific management of industry, personal administration took root. So the three areas of labor welfare, industrial relations and personal administration were being looked after the three professional functionaries, welfare officer, labor officer and a personal officer. However, in the early 80s, the area of labor officer largely merged with personal administration, which was referred to as personal management. Then personal management during the phase of 1980s. In 1980s, HRM was regarded as a specialized profession, such as that of other professional functions. In addition to industrial relation functions, although sometimes the industrial relations formed a separate branch, the personal branch was responsible for varied functions, that is employment, safety training, wages and salary administration and research and development. So indeed, the activities involved in the personal department were akin to those performed in this department in other Western countries. So especially where the personal, industrial relations and welfare functions were combined in one department, three categories of activities relating to these functions were obtained. So the personnel department involves in technical and allied services. So thus industrial relation activities included contract negotiations, grievance handling, preparation and presentation of arbitration cases, and research in labor problems. For educational activities including employees training, supervisory training, organizational planning and management development, communication program, etc. For wage and salary administration included preparation of job description, job evaluations, incentives and profit sharing systems, and executive compensation. For employment activities such as recruiting, psychological testing, medical examination, interviewing, and employees record keeping and technical services, health and welfare measures were included. So the personnel manager's role was to advise. Was to advise and usually they advise the line and top management in respect of legal matters regarding to the termination of services and transfer, human relations problems confronting the line managers, and technical procedures in areas such as wages and salary administration. So in some instances the personnel managers was required to advise management regarding the improvement of human climate in the organization. uh, Walter D. Sun had defined personal management as that activity in an enterprise which strives to mold human resources into an effective organization, providing opportunities for maximum individual contribution under desirable working conditions, promotes individual development, and encourages mutual confidence, understanding between employees and the employers, as well as the employees amongst themselves. Now, if you look into that, many people use personal management and in HRM interchangeably, but they are different. Personal management is an old school approach. It's reactive, administrative, it's more of short term, and if a problem arises, they fix it. So their main concerns actually it about the accurate payroll, compliance with laws, keeping personal files. The employees are seen as a cost to minimize, whereas if you talk about HRM, is the more of a modern approach. So personal management, it is more of a traditional approach, as I said that, or an old school approach. But HRM is a modern approach. It is proactive, it is strategic, it has long term goals, interventions. They anticipate problems before they occur. So that's why they are considered to be proactive, because they understand the problem, they anticipate, they have a vision regarding the issues and problems or challenges which they might encounter, and they try to prepare themselves beforehand. So solutions are there in case of any untoward or in case of any eventuality in the organization. They align people strategies with business goals, and employees are seen as an asset to invest in. So for example, personal management asks, how do we record sick leave? Whereas HRM asks, why is sick leave high, and how do we improve wellness? So this is the difference between the approach personal management goes with and human resource management has. So this is just they simply, as I mentioned earlier, that more of a administrative, more of a mechanical way of finding out, looking, just not getting into the deeper aspects of human relations in personal management, just asking that how do we record sick leave, or what are why this person is absent instead of this person. I mean, it is more about that they're absent, that's it. If an employee is absent for a longer period of time, they will not deeply go into the fact that why or what are the issues related to his personal life which is affecting the productivity and efficiency. So this is what personal management is. That another difference, personal management, it centralizes decisions at headquarters, whereas HRM, it empowers the line managers. The line managers, they have that kind of power, that authority, they have some autonomy, to function effectively, to create, I mean, to rectify any issues, any problems which from their side. So there is a table, if you could see, there is a table there which gives a brief, understanding or a brief difference of aspect personal management HRM. If you talk about the approach, personal management is reactive, whereas HRM is proactive. Reactive when the situation has occurred, when any untoward incident had occurred, then they talk about the solutions and problems, whereas HRM is more proactive, as I mentioned earlier, that they anticipate problems and they try to find out the solutions beforehand. Then the focus, personal manager is more of an administrative. HRM is more of a strategic, because they try to align the goals, the objectives of an employee with the organization. They strategize at how they have to achieve the targets, what are the means and techniques and tools in order to expand the organization, where it serves both, the individual's objectives, individual's approach, or the individual's goals along with the organizational goals. Then time horizon, personal management short term. When we talk about the short term, in the sense that they, if a problem arises, they fix immediately and then they might move on. They might not get into the deeper aspect that this kind of problem might not occur, which is there in HRM. So they have a long term strategy approach to deal with the problem that which might not occur. So it so in personal management here, it focuses on the short term, I would say, solutions to a problem, rather than eliminating the problem from a different perspective, and minimizing the effect, or at least bringing about such solution that such kind of problems might not occur in future. Then employees, cost to control, they are asset to develop. When you talk about the employees, in our personal management, they have cost to control in their sense. Here, the employees are just being considered as an individual, as a person who has given their services, and they are being paid for their services. So they are a costing, cost benefit analysis has been done, and they are being there to organize, to function effectively in the organization. Their productivity and efficiency is also related to the, in fact, the remuneration, or I would say the wages and incentives are related to the productivity and efficiency of the employees. And whereas in HRM, people or the employees are considered as an asset. They are just not means to an end, but here they have a different approach. They are an asset to develop. In HRM, the organization invest in people so that they grow, they develop intellectually, technically. So they are considered as an important source of, existence. Then the key activities, payroll, compliance. HRM is much more than that. It has a more wider horizon: talent management, organizational culture, performance appraisal, career enhancement and development. These are all part of HRM. Then if you talk about the decision making process, is more of a centralized. As I said, that it centralizes decisions at headquarters. So any issues, any challenging part, or any kind of decision has to be made, it will be directly referred to the headquarters, or to the head of the company or the organization. But in HRM, the power is decentralized. It empowers every manager, supervisor, even the general manager, to have autonomy, to have that kind of decision making power, to control, to regulate, to manage the affairs of the organization. So they are being designated with certain at different level, because again there is an hierarchy which is both in the personal management as well as human resource management. But then the only difference is that the centralization of power and decentralization. So the power in personal management, the power is vested with the high authorities, and it is not being communicated with other, other members, other managers or supervisors. But in HRM, that is not the case. Every individual, they have some kind of autonomy, authority. It empowers the managers, the general managers, to look after the affairs of the organization. Communication, if we talk about the communication, of course, personal management is more often indirect, as they do not have a direct contact or direct relation with the managers. So they have, if they have any kind of grievance or any kind of, they have to go through other channels, or it is usually through indirect method, not directly noting it, or giving their suggestions or their feedback, or any queries or any grievance, or any kind of communication to the manager. But in HRM, it is more of a direct and transparent communication between the employer, the employee, subordinates, team members, so on and so forth. So this is all about my today's lecture. I have discussed about the evolution of personal management, how personal management has come and it been now it has taken HRM has taken the center stage. Thank you, everyone.